Well, a very big welcome to everyone. We are just going to wait for a few more minutes before some more people can attend, and then we will begin there. All right, well, welcome everybody to the Zero Bureaucracy presentation. I'll begin sharing my screen now and we can begin. Brilliant. So look, this is towards a zero bureaucracy mindset. So as you all know, the government has a great new initiative to move not only government, but society towards a zero bureaucracy mindset, which isn't just about government, but that's actually about a whole of society, from the smallest startup. So it doesn't matter if you're a student, it doesn't matter if you're working on a big project, it doesn't matter if you're a government employee. This is really towards how do you do things quicker, cheaper, and deliver more for the customer. So quickly about me, I feel like I know many people who are on this hackathon, but I've worked across the world for governments, Australia and across the Gulf region. I've done significant regulatory reform and have been involved in the startup ecosystem for quite a long time now. And AI in the Art of Government, a book of mine, is coming out very shortly. So really excited to give this presentation on achieving zero bureaucracy. I think that's, again, something that many governments struggle with and why this is such an important initiative. So first of all, it's really important that zero bureaucracy isn't just a great idea, but it's actually something practical, something tangible that startups can deliver on, and that startups can link their product or service to what the government's trying to achieve. So it's about delivering for customers fundamentally. And what we're going to do is look at how that can be used not only to empower startups, but also using startups as a vehicle, as an engine to power innovation, and that innovation to then lead to deregulation, to less bureaucracy, and to a more efficient regulatory system. So first of all, disruption is the opportunity. That's one of the most, I guess, famous lines that all startups really should work to capitalize on disruption. For a government entity, if you're working in government, I think the real question that you have to ask yourself is, with new technology such as AI, what is the opportunity for my department, for my government entity? And the idea of internal startups, so coming up with a new idea or a new policy within your government entity, and then looking at how that government entity can support you, is a really key area, and something that's really, I would encourage you to think about as you go along this hackathon. So AI is going to cause 300 million jobs to be lost, and it's going to affect 1 in 5 working professionals. I would say it's probably going to be more than 1 in 5, to be honest with you. These statistics are taken from Goldman Sachs, and it's going to be really fundamental. As we progress as a society and as AI becomes more integrated into everything that we do, it's not going to be so much about can you use AI or not. It's going to be how effectively you can use it, and are your AI models better than the AI models of your competitor? So it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of how. I think it's encouraging that many of our devices already feature some sort of AI. The definition as to what is AI is a real challenge, if you like, and something that I think academia is still debating. But for us, we're talking about ChatGPT, we're talking about large language models and those sorts of things, alongside, I guess, a lot of what Sam Altman is working on. So he's sort of the father of ChatGPT. So global best practice, I really want to bring home that there are opportunities for you to solve problems simply by copying and pasting what's happened overseas and adjusting that for the local context. So for Australia, we have an app. It's called Service New South Wales, and that one application centralizes a lot of what maybe 10 or 20 years ago, you would need to physically go down to a government office and put in documents and registration and wait in lines and so on. Now you could do so much through the New South Wales app. You can even pay your fines if you've got a parking fine or a car fine. There's also a great usage of that app during COVID. So they would say, watch out for these hotspots. Here's where you can get some help. Or maybe you need another booster shot. So that was a great example of how an app can be used in crisis management. For the UAE, I'm a big fan of Talabat, and I'm sure many people here have used Talabat and are fans of Talabat. So looking at, what are some more commercial ways that you can use, um, chatbots and AI into existing services. So you might already be working for a very large corporate, and you might be thinking, how can we use AI? How can we integrate AI into what we're already doing? So what we're seeing is there are a number of even consulting firms that have developed their own AI, or they've taken an AI and they're training it on the data that they've got available. So that might be client data, that might be consumer data, and that's how they create an AI that's bespoke, that's got a competitive edge over their competitors, right? I would, I guess, caution everybody. What I'm noticing a lot in the startup landscape is that a lot of people are just sort of throwing chatbots out there as sort of the easy tick box. AI is more than just a chatbot. And so think about when you're coming up with your business idea or your solution to the challenges, what in addition to a chatbot or can I do or how can I make my chatbot better? Lastly, the UK. So they've got a very deep fintech ecosystem, so financial technology startups. They've got a really, really interesting banking system as well, and the rise of what are called neobanks and micro banking, so smaller banks and new banks. Revolut is one of those. So I'm a customer of Revolut, and basically I was able to register, open a bank account, register, and get a credit card without having to visit an office physically. So I did it all online, all via the app. Very, very quick, very, very simple. The key with a lot of finance and banking regulation is KYC. So KYC is know your customer. So you might have to make sure that your customer is getting their money legitimately, that you're helping good people do business and do work rather than criminals or something like that. So keep in mind how regulation is and being compliant is very important when using AI. So it's very important just to sort of keep that in mind. So here's some questions for you to think about. If you were here in person, this is something that I would ask and get your feedback on. But there are three sort of questions that I'd like you to just consider as I'm going through the rest of this presentation. The first is how you can, for your challenge, how you can apply AI to your business, to your challenge, to your government entity. There's a lot of opportunities for that, even if that means, for example, just speeding up the process for market research, or you want to develop do some code, you can do coding. So how can you hasten the development, accelerate the development of your startup or idea? That's an example for you. The middle question, looking at personally, how can you use AI to increase your personal productivity, or how can you use it to empower your team or make your team more efficient? And that can be anything from project management right the way through to how do you brainstorm new ideas and new solutions? Finally, I think it's important to think about what the barriers for implementation are. You might have the best idea on the planet, but if it's very difficult to implement, just think about, is that an idea you want to run with in this hackathon? Think about practical things that can be implemented by the government entity for whom you're answering the challenge. So think practically, think logically. Yeah, that would be a key recommendation I would make to you. So what does zero bureaucracy mean for you? So firstly, I already talked a little bit about personal productivity. So how you can use AI to increase your work output, but also critically, and that's the second cluster, how do you use it to augment your weaknesses, right? So you might not be a very good coder. I cannot code to save my life, but how can you use AI to code for you, at least in a basic sense? For design, you might not be a very good designer. You might not be good at finding images that suit your presentation or some sort of logo design, for example. So how can you use artificially generated images to help you in that regard? Financial capability, so looking at budgeting, financial planning, all of that sort of that cluster of highly mathematical, technical things. That's another area where you can certainly use AI very productively. The third is building your strengths. So you might be a great coder, if I can keep running with that example, but you can use AI to essentially accelerate your coding, so that you come in and you do the ultra high value add stuff whilst all the repetitive monotonous work is done by AI. The entrepreneurial spirit, finally, using AI to explore new ideas, to do mind maps, to do research. That's a really great use of it. Remembering what Albert Einstein said, which true intelligence is not about knowledge, but imagination. So how can you use AI to power your imagination? Opportunities. So look, again, there are so many opportunities when it comes to zero bureaucracy, looking at how can government do things more efficiently, or how can I help government to achieve the goals that they want to achieve more efficiently? That might be sustainability. That might be in relation to helping people of determination. So for ideas, AI is going to help you create things faster. For startups, it'll help you implement your idea quickly, more quickly, and also pivot. So startups, you might come up with a great idea. It might look great. You might carry on for a while and you realize, hey, you know what? We actually have to change our idea or pivot it or somehow make some significant edit because of consumer feedback, or maybe it's too expensive to do something. So pivoting is a really important concept and something that a lot of startups, I think, can struggle with, and using AI to the extent that you can is something just to keep in mind. Solutions. So there are many people on a solution hackathon, on a solution stream. So looking at how do you make your progress towards a solution more rapid. Unknown unknowns. So Donald Rumsfeld was the United States Defense Secretary, and he talked about unknown unknowns. So that's the idea that you don't know things and you don't know that you don't know them. So it's a real big question mark, right? So using AI to try and explore into the unknown unknowns, to try and articulate what you don't know, and obviously then know it. So the second little thing that I wanted to bring out is the importance of using data. So to the right there, there's a little cluster of icons. So that's taken from Australia. And on this dashboard, you can access a lot of open data that the government has. So again, if you want to crunch that data, if you want to get insights from that data, you can feed that into different AI models and get really significant insights that you can then base your business off. Great. So look, this is again me just drawing out the unknown unknowns. So making sure that you can use AI from a learning and development process. So it doesn't matter if you're an accountant or a lawyer, or if you're a startup entrepreneur, you can still use AI to really power what you don't know and help progress you from a professional development perspective, but also as you come up with ideas and capture opportunities. So I think, again, these are three questions that I want you to think about. What do you know about AI right now? What do you want to learn about AI in this hackathon? This is a great opportunity for you to explore different aspects of AI. And the third is, what do you think the opportunity with AI is? So there are lots of potential ways to capitalize on the financial opportunity here, whether that's starting a business or expanding product and service offerings, or coming up with new and different ways that government can deliver their products and services. So think about what that is for you. There are several milestones that I want you to think about that really put zero bureaucracy at the center. So the first is that idea of customer service. So putting the customer first. You can have a great idea, but it always needs to come back to the customer. The second is it solves a real problem. Does your idea actually solve a problem, or do you have a solution but no problem? Do you have a product but it doesn't solve any problem? So be very, again, this links back to what is the customer problems? What is the customer's problem? The third is innovative solution. So has your solution been done already? Does it already exist in the UAE, or is it new? If it is new, how is it new? Ask yourself that question. A scalable business model is very important. You need to make sure that whatever solution you have, whatever business you come up with, whatever app you have, that it can be used not just by one person, but by lots of different people, that ideally it can go global. So I want you to reflect what ideas, what are your ideas' weakness? Okay, it might be fall into one of these categories. How can I make it stronger, and what do I need to progress my idea? I'm going to touch on the startup lifecycle because lots of people I've spoken to are unaware of it. So there are 4 stages. The first is generation. So that's where most of you are going to be today. So that's coming up with the idea. You are doing market research, you've identified a problem, you're looking at who is your target customer audience. The second is startup. So that's when you've identified the problem, you've come up with a solution, and you're executing on that solution. You've got an MVP, and you're starting to get customers, followers. You're starting to look at fundraising and to fundraise. Third is growth. So that's obviously when you are getting hundreds of thousands of users, you've got the money is coming in the door and things look great, but there are unique challenges associated with the growth phase. The fourth is maturity. So for those who are working in government, the challenges associated with a mature organization are similar in some regards to that for a company that's been established for many decades. So for the generation and startup phase, one of the key questions that I want you to ask yourself is, what is the problem I'm solving? I want you to use a lot of market data, using open data to justify your solution. And finally, I want you to challenge market assumptions. I want you to challenge the status quo and look at business models that are going to be disruptive, but are also going to be sustainable over the long term. An MVP, so that's a minimum viable product or a prototype. That's in the startup phase again. I've seen many great startups that are already working on that during this hackathon, and I would encourage you to continue to build out those MVPs because they are great and will help you be more competitive as a startup. Again, use AI to accelerate the development of your prototype. The 3X rule is a great rule of thumb. So that is that the value you're providing the consumer is 3 times the price you are asking. And that's a great way to think about, at what price should I put my product? Am I providing enough value or not? The growth and maturity phase. So growth, the key question is, how do I scale my business sustainably? How do I recruit and train people quickly? How do I make sure that even though I'm growing very quickly as a company, as a startup, I'm not losing the thing that makes my company special? So I'm keeping my culture, I'm keeping that entrepreneurial spirit alive and well. For maturity, the question is, how do I maintain relevance? How do I make sure that small startups are not taking away my business? How do I stay agile? How do I keep ahead of the competition? And how do I introduce new ideas, new product lines? And that's the idea of the internal startup. So if you're in government, and I know many of you are working in government, the question is, how are we able to deliver new products and services to customers? Or thinking of it a different way, how do I improve the delivery of existing products and services? This is the startup timeline in a graphical format. The one thing that I'd point out is the high risk stage. So that's for a lot of startups, that's where they need money. They haven't got any revenue yet. So that's the high risk critical stage. After maturity, if a company is unsuccessful in being able to reinvent itself, then it tends to go into decline. So ask yourself where you are. I think the majority of people are in the generation and startup phase, but it's just good to reflect on that for a moment, because that'll depend on where you're at. Again, if you're in government, you're probably in the maturity area. So for regulation, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how regulation can really be used for good, to ensure that people are able to innovate, that people are able and startups are able to scale. So the first, particularly when we talk about AI, is that idea that regulation can be very technical, right? So it might be technically related to something in medicine. It might be technically related to building standards or architectural standards, right? For AI and for technology, I think we're getting to a point where we are seeing an increased specialization, and that is going to continue. It needs to be done well to ensure that startups can continue to come up with new products and services. The second is a growing impact. So what we're seeing is, the more you regulate, the more the impact those regulations will have. That sounds very common sense, but the flip side of the coin is, the more you regulate, the more difficult it is in many instances for a startup to begin and for a startup to grow, and for new products and services to come out, because they've got to go and get the licenses. They've got to make sure it complies. It means lawyers become more critical when you're coming up with new startup ideas, and it means that the cost of everything for the private sector goes up. I think it's critical that for governments wanting to be world leaders in AI, and generally, your regulation has to keep up with what's happening globally, but you don't want to regulate so much that suddenly for any AI startup, they've got to jump through lots of regulatory hoops, lots of burdens, and pay a lot of money just to get off the ground. So that's a very key thing to keep in mind. One last thing that I wanted to say on that last slide actually was for a lot of people in government, there's a tightrope, there's a balance to keep between regulating too much on the one hand, that will reduce innovation, but you need to regulate enough so that there is a safe marketplace, a healthy marketplace that promotes competition, that promotes innovation. So for government policymakers, this is really for you. When you're making a new regulation, when you're coming up with a new policy, it's critical to start with the end in mind. What is the outcome that you want? For example, if you're coming up with a new regulation, ask yourself, is this going to lead to more startups or not? Is it going to lead to more innovation or less innovation? What does success look like? I see a lot of people talking about when they come up with new regulation, they're unable to articulate what does success look like, and they're unable to show what that might look like in numbers. So they tend to be very vague. The other thing is from a regulatory perspective, what is the UAE's global niche? So for tax, the UAE's global niche was zero tax, right? So that's a great way to say, how can we outcompete other countries through regulation, by using regulation as a tool for innovation? And obviously zero tax means you attract global talent, you attract global businesses, and that contributes to the overall innovation ecosystem. Implementation. So you've come up with your, hopefully you know what success looks like. You've got a draft of your policy. The first step, really, and you want to do this even when you're drafting your proposed piece of regulation, is to ask who is affected. If you're coming up with AI regulation, you've got to ask yourself, who in the AI ecosystem is affected? It's going to be small businesses, it's going to be startups, it's going to be investors, people investing in AI startups. You want to see who is a specialist in this field, who are the people that know AI better than anybody else if it's AI regulation. And then you want to get their feedback. You want to consult with them. You want to have conversation with them. You want to have dialogue. You want to have lots of roundtables so that the regulation that you're coming up with, the policy that you're coming up with, has input from lots and lots of different people, lots of different stakeholders. And it's also a way of informing them, hey, look, this change is coming. Be ready. Okay. So you want to incorporate those changes throughout the process. You want to make sure that whatever challenge you've got, it's whatever challenge or issue they have with your policy or suggestions, they might have ideas of how you can make it better and more efficient, that it's incorporated into the process. So hopefully at this point, you've got some feedback and you want to keep doing input and keep having good stakeholder engagement and having them input into the policy-making process, into the new regulations that you've got. When you get later on in the stage, it's also important to think about unintended consequences. So if you pass a piece of regulation, what could happen that you're not expecting? If you, for example, put up the tax rate, the personal income tax rate, you might think, well, that's going to be great. The government will have more money that we can spend on roads and schools. But you might not think about if you increase the tax rate, lots of small businesses might leave. Lots of individuals might leave and work elsewhere. So think about what are the unintended consequences of any policy. And a good way to identify those unintended consequences is simply to include stakeholders in the process. The other cluster of challenges that I've seen is the paralysis of analysis. So that's when there's so much discussion, so much analysis, so much stakeholder engagement that nothing gets done. So at some point, you do need to be bold, you need to be courageous and brave, and you need to actually implement your policy idea. The last cluster is that idea of pivoting. So it's important to schedule a review of the new piece of regulation and the new policy. And then at that point to say, okay, this didn't work as we thought it did. And so you adjust it. You go back to your stakeholders, you go back to the people that this regulation is affecting, and you say, hey, how's this going? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? What can we do better? And then you build it out, you change it, you pivot it, just like a startup. So always return to your customers, always return to the people that it is affected most by. And again, that's critical when you talk about a startup, as it is for government regulation, as it is for policy. So there are two clusters that I really want to emphasize here. One are market rules, and the second is supporting innovation. So you want to promote fair competition with regulation. You want to make sure that any regulation and laws government workers put in place, that those boundaries enhance creativity and that they enhance the rules of the game. I just see a question. So what I'll do is answer questions at the end, if I can possibly do that, and then go from there. But I will get your question. If anybody else has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So the other point that I really want to emphasize is this idea of a long-term vision. So the UAE has great long-term vision. So making sure there's alignment between the regulation and the policy and where you're looking to what you're looking to regulate. Building innovation engine. So I've talked about that a bit, but that's idea that if you're going for zero bureaucracy, how do you make sure that if you're a government or you're a startup, that you're fitting into the ecosystem that's already there, that you're building it out, that you're promoting a safe market, a market that promotes stability and fairness, but also has a really strong engine for growth. So you want to make sure that there isn't too much regulation that creates friction, that creates tension, and increases the cost of doing business. Now, if you're a startup, the last thing you want is to sit there looking at what laws and what rules do I comply with or not comply with, and then you have to pay lots of money to lawyers and accountants and finance people just to make sure that you can actually keep going with your idea, and you haven't even begun. So this is a particularly big problem in many European countries where the costs are very high to start a business, because the reality is you've got to comply with so many laws and regulations. You've got to get more licenses than you know what to do with. And that at the end of the day, many startup founders end up saying, you know what, this is too difficult. And they go overseas, perhaps to a place like the UAE. So I really want to give a great example of how in Australia, for example, we're using AI and how, or just innovative solutions. So I talked a bit about the Service New South Wales app, but there are many other applications from healthcare. So how you could use AI in a chatbot format, for example, to talk about healthcare concerns. You might have, older people who need assistance for crisis response. How would you be able to couple drone technology, for example? Now, with AI in the UAE, there were, in Dubai rather, there were some floods very recently, and that led to a number of roads being closed. How could you use, for example, drones to identify what roads are closed, and then AI to sort of filter and, rank order which roads are the most important to reopen as quickly as possible. So there are lots of different new ways to implement AI and to use to complement existing technology. There's a lot in transport. So how can Kareem be improved using AI? What does Kareem 2.0 look like with AI? Logistics is a similarly big field. So the UAE is obviously a real hub of logistics, both when you're talking about airlines, but also freight. So again, what are some applications of AI that these vendors could use, these businesses in this sphere could use to really accelerate the development of those startups? So look, that's my presentation in a nutshell. I'm happy to take additional questions that anybody else might have. Alternatively, this presentation will also be delivered face-to-face, so happy to take them there. So there is a question by Amir Ali, who says, tomorrow is the beginning of the solution hackathon for government employees. Is it online or in person? Because no details were sent by emails after we submit. So it is face-to-face, so it is being held in Dubai. I will make sure that an additional email goes out to give you additional information, Amir. But hopefully you will join us in Dubai. Are there other questions from the audience? Otherwise, I'm happy to leave it there. Fantastic. Well, look, I've been Phil Longley, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you in Dubai. Thanks.